Hey, I'm Mel Crafting, and today I'm making a watercolor galaxy birthday card. For more information, head over to my blog craftyepicurean.com. So the inspiration for this card was this galaxy background I made using some Koh-i-Noor watercolor paints. I'll put a link in the top right hand corner for my first impressions or review of those paints when I post a video. To give it a bit more of a space themed, I decided I wanted to use some space themed die cuts that I already had coloured in using alcohol markers, which I had on stock or spare in my stash, and I just arranged them around that nebula in the middle to give it a bit of a space theme. I also wanted to put a sentiment in there. It's going to be a birthday sentiment because it'll be a birthday card, because I need one for my nephew for a gift I'm giving him shortly. I decided the sentiment will be whoa, happy birthday, the whoa giving it a bit of an out of this world feel to match the space theme that I'm going for. And I'm using an anti-static powder tool because I'm going to heat emboss that sentiment onto this black cardstock sentiment strip. Here's my clear embossing ink stamp pad, which I'm inking up the stamps with and pressing down on the sentiment strip. Now it's quite important you use a anti-static powder tool before you stamp, so that the embossing powder only sticks to where you've stamped the sentiment. Otherwise it can make it look a little untidy when you have little specks of powder everywhere. So I stamped that about 3 or 4 times, remove it from my stamping platform, and now I'm going to bring in a piece of non-stick baking paper. I grab my sentiment strip, and today I'm going to sprinkle on some white embossing powder. This is the embossing powder produced by Ranger. I'll sprinkle that all over that sticky clear embossing ink on that sentiment strip. Do this a few times, a couple of times, a few times, and then shake off and tap the excess off. Now there was a little bit on the end of that Y that has lingered on there, and I just rubbed that off with my finger. It's a bit safer to use a paintbrush to do that, but sometimes I get a little bit lazy. Yep. So once you're happy with the coverage of the sentiment, I've gone away and heat set the embossing powder, and that's what it looks like. So now I'm going to arrange the sentiment strip on the card, and I decide I want to put at least one of those space themed die cuts over the top of the sentiment strip on the right. And you'll see that on the left, where the washi tape was whilst I was stamping the sentiment, stayed sticky for a little bit and grabbed a bit of that embossing powder. So that was how I wanted the arrangement of the card to be, as you just saw before. And now I'm going to adhere the sentiment strip down with some double-sided tape. And I put it back on just to make sure where I want to place it. And I decide I need that extra little bit on the edge if I want it to go all the way to the right of the card front. So I add a little bit more double-sided tape, place that on the front of the card to see what it looks like, and then put the rocket over the top. And then I decide that I actually want the rocket to cover the end of the sentiment strip, so I cut off a bit off the end, so now it won't go all the way to the right of the card. And I'm going to place it slightly over so the mistake on the left will be trimmed off after I stick it down, and the right will be covered up by the rocket die cut, and the sentiment strip won't go all the way to the right. So I've just removed the backing paper off the double-sided tape and stuck that down. I'm now going to place the rocket down just over the edge of it, so that it looks like the sentiment strip stops at the rocket. And I'm going to use some foam tape to place that down to give it a little bit of dimension and get it to pop up a little bit. You can use square or circular double-sided dots, mounting dots if you like, but I like using foam tape because it just gives it a little bit of dimension and not too high. The rest of these space theme die cuts, I'm just going to adhere to the card using standard double-sided tape. Here I'm just removing the backing paper on all these elements and sticking them down. And I'm just making sure, pressing them down quite firmly after I take that double-sided tape off to make sure they stick down properly. Now I'm going to trim off the excess on that sentiment strip using a pair of scissors. And now the next step is mounting it onto a card base, and I'm using a black card base today. And it's got a little bit of a border around the edge of the card front. And once again, I'm just going to use double-sided tape to adhere the card front to the card base. I like to adhere my card fronts to my card bases using double-sided tape with a border around the edge and one piece in the center. So I'll now remove the backing paper just quickly, or as quick as I can. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to catch the edge without getting all of the tape off. But there we go. Do a bit of a fast forward to the last piece where I take the backing paper off, and then I'm just going to stick it down to the card base, trying to make sure that there's an even border around the outside of the card front. Yep, and I press that down to make sure it is fully adhered down. And that's how I made this watercolor galaxy birthday card. For more information, head over to my blog craftyepicurean.com, and thank you for watching.